They told her the kitchen was where she belonged, stirring soup, not diffusing bombs. Executive Chef Marcus Rodriguez had seen plenty of soldiers shuffled into his Fort Benning mess hall, but none who looked quite so out of place as the small-framed woman standing before him that humid Georgia morning. At barely 5'3" and weighing maybe 115 pounds soaking wet, Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez looked more suited for filing paperwork than handling the kind of explosive situations that had earned her 3 commendations and a reputation as one of the Army's most precise demolitions experts. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But sometimes the quietest hands hold the deadliest skills, and sometimes the most underestimated soldiers carry the most dangerous knowledge. What began as kitchen punishment would end with shattered assumptions, a near-catastrophic emergency, and one chef forced to confront his own prejudices about who belonged where in the modern military. The morning sun beat mercilessly against the concrete walls of Fort Benning's central mess facility as Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez reported for what she considered the most humiliating assignment of her 8-year military career. Her pristine dress uniform felt heavy in the oppressive Georgia heat, each ribbon and badge a reminder of achievements that apparently meant nothing to her new commanding officer. Colonel James Hartwell had made his position crystal clear during their brief meeting 3 days earlier. After what he termed the incident during the demolitions training exercise, an incident that had saved 2 lives but violated direct orders, Elena would spend the next 30 days on kitchen duty, while the Army decided whether her insubordination warranted formal disciplinary action. Maybe sometime peeling potatoes will remind you about following the chain of command, Hartwell had said, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension that made Elena's jaw clench involuntarily. The colonel represented everything she despised about old-school military thinking, rigid, unimaginative, and utterly convinced that unconventional approaches were synonymous with failure. Now, standing outside the industrial kitchen doors, Elena took a deep breath and tried to push aside her frustration. 30 days. She could survive anything for 30 days, even if it meant trading her explosives equipment for mixing bowls and her tactical expertise for food prep duties. The kitchen stretched before her like an aircraft hangar, filled with stainless steel surfaces that gleamed under harsh fluorescent lighting. Steam rose from massive pots, while the rhythmic chopping of vegetables created a percussion backdrop to the controlled chaos of feeding 3,000 soldiers daily. The air hung thick with the smell of sautéed onions, industrial-strength cleaning supplies, and the underlying metallic scent that seemed to permeate every military facility. Executive Chef Marcus Rodriguez stood at the central prep station, his broad shoulders and commanding presence making it clear who ran this particular operation. At 42, he had spent 15 years building the Fort Benning mess hall into one of the most efficiently run food service operations in the southeastern United States. His dark hair showed threads of premature gray, and his weathered hands moved with the precision of someone who had chopped countless vegetables and managed countless crises. Marcus looked up from his inventory sheets as Elena approached, his brown eyes taking in her slight frame with unconcealed skepticism. He had been warned about the incoming soldier, some demolition specialist who had gotten herself in trouble and needed to be kept busy with menial tasks. What he hadn't expected was someone who looked like she might blow away in a strong wind. "You must be Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that hinted of his El Paso origins. "I'm Chef Rodriguez. Colonel Hartwell says you're here for kitchen duty." His tone suggested he viewed this arrangement as an unwelcome burden rather than additional help. "Yes, sir," Elena replied, maintaining the formal posture that had become second nature during her military career. Marcus studied her for a long moment, noting the way she held herself with military bearing despite her obvious discomfort with the situation. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her brown eyes held a steady intelligence that didn't quite match his preconceptions about troublemaking soldiers being dumped in his kitchen. "What's your background, Vasquez? Before you ended up here, I mean." "Explosive ordnance disposal, sir. 8 years active duty, currently assigned to the 52nd EOD Company." Elena's voice remained steady, though she could see the surprise flicker across the chef's face. "EOD?"
Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You handle bombs and they're putting you on potato duty?" "Apparently so, sir." The chef shook his head with what might have been amusement or frustration. "Well, we're not exactly dealing with life-and-death situations here, but I run a tight operation. 3 meals a day for 3,000 hungry soldiers doesn't happen by accident. You follow orders, you work hard, and you don't cause problems. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir." Marcus gestured toward the prep area where several other soldiers were already working on morning meal preparations. "Sergeant Williams will show you the basics. We start breakfast prep at 0500, lunch at 900, dinner at 1400. Today, you're on vegetable prep. Tomorrow, we'll see how you handle more complex tasks." Sergeant First Class David Williams looked up from a massive pile of carrots as Elena approached his station. At 28, he had been working kitchen duties for 6 months after a knee injury had temporarily sidelined him from his regular infantry assignment. His friendly demeanor offered a welcome contrast to the chef's obvious skepticism. "So you're the EOD specialist everyone's talking about," David said, handing Elena a peeler and indicating the mountain of potatoes waiting for attention. Elena considered her response carefully. The official story was simple enough. She had disobeyed a direct order during a training exercise. The reality was more complicated, involving split-second decisions, calculated risks, and 2 young soldiers who might have died if she had followed protocol instead of her instincts. "Made a judgment call that didn't align with my commanding officers," she said finally, beginning to work on the potatoes with methodical efficiency. David nodded knowingly. "Been there. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't the same as doing what you're told." Chef Rodriguez runs things pretty straight here, though. He's tough but fair, and he actually cares about feeding people well instead of just checking boxes. As Elena settled into the rhythm of food preparation, she found herself observing the kitchen operations with the same analytical eye she brought to explosive situations. The timing, coordination, and logistical complexity required to produce thousands of meals daily impressed her more than she had expected. Each station operated with military precision, but there was also an element of creative problem-solving that reminded her of her EOD work.
"You're picking this up pretty quickly," David observed after watching Elena efficiently process vegetables for 20 minutes. "Most people take longer to get the timing right." "Precision and consistency," Elena replied without looking up from her work. "The same principles apply, whether you're cutting potatoes or cutting fuses." The comment drew curious looks from nearby soldiers, most of whom had heard rumors about the EOD specialist who had been assigned to kitchen duty but hadn't quite believed the stories. Elena Vasquez didn't fit anyone's mental image of a bomb disposal expert, which had been both an advantage and a source of frustration throughout her career. Chef Rodriguez had been monitoring the new addition to his staff from across the kitchen, noting her work pace and attention to detail. Whatever had gotten her in trouble with her commanding officer, it clearly hadn't been incompetence. She moved with the same precise efficiency that characterized his best kitchen staff, adapting quickly to unfamiliar tasks. "Vasquez," he called out during a brief lull in the morning rush, "have you had any food service experience before this?" "No, sir, but I'm used to following detailed procedures under pressure." "What kind of procedures?" Elena paused in her work, considering how much to reveal about her background. "Bomb disposal protocols, sir. Step-by-step processes where missing a detail can have serious consequences." The kitchen fell noticeably quieter as other soldiers stopped their work to listen. Stories about EOD specialists had acquired near-mythical status among regular Army personnel, who rarely encountered the specialists responsible for handling the most dangerous explosive situations. "You actually defuse bombs?" asked Private Martinez, a young soldier who had been assigned to dishwashing duty after arriving at Fort Benning just weeks earlier. "When necessary," Elena replied simply, "though most of our work involves controlled demolitions, route clearance, and training exercises." Chef Rodriguez found himself reconsidering his initial assessment of the woman, currently peeling potatoes at his prep station. EOD specialists underwent some of the most rigorous training in the military, requiring not just technical expertise, but exceptional mental discipline and decision-making capabilities under extreme pressure. "How'd you end up in that field?"
he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier skepticism. Elena's hands never stopped moving as she continued her food preparation tasks. I started in engineering, discovered I had an aptitude for understanding how things work and how they come apart. EOD seemed like a natural progression. And the Army let someone your size handle explosives? The question contained assumptions that Elena had encountered countless times throughout her career. Her slight physical build led many people to underestimate her capabilities, a prejudice that had sometimes worked to her advantage in dangerous situations where being underestimated could provide tactical benefits. Size doesn't determine competence, sir. Precision, knowledge, and steady hands matter more than physical strength in EOD work. Chef Rodriguez nodded slowly, beginning to understand that his kitchen duty assignment might be more complex than he had initially assumed. The woman efficiently processing vegetables at his prep station possessed specialized knowledge and training that represented years of intensive preparation for some of the military's most challenging assignments. As the morning progressed and breakfast service began, Elena continued working with quiet competence that gradually earned grudging respect from the kitchen staff. She asked intelligent questions, adapted quickly to new tasks, and maintained the kind of focused attention to detail that Chef Rodriguez valued in his operation.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. But beneath her professional demeanor, Elena wrestled with frustration that had been building since her reassignment. 8 years of specialized training, countless hours of study and practice, 3 commendations for exceptional performance under pressure, all reduced to 30 days of punishment duty because she had prioritized lives over protocol. The incident replayed itself in her mind as she worked. The training exercise that had gone wrong when an unexploded device had shifted position, threatening 2 young soldiers who had been caught in the danger zone. Protocol demanded that she wait for backup and follow standard evacuation procedures. Her instincts had told her that waiting might cost lives, so she had acted immediately to neutralize the threat. She had been right. The device had been more unstable than initial assessments suggested, and waiting for backup would have resulted in a catastrophic explosion. But being right didn't matter to Colonel Hartwell, who valued adherence to chain of command above all other considerations. Now she found herself chopping vegetables instead of saving lives, her expertise wasted on tasks that any minimally trained soldier could perform adequately. The situation felt like a betrayal of everything she had worked to achieve, a reduction of her professional identity to punishment duty that served no constructive purpose. As lunch preparation began and the kitchen's pace intensified, Elena threw herself into the work with the same intensity she brought to explosive situations. If she was going to spend 30 days on this assignment, she would excel at every task, proving that her capabilities extended far beyond anyone's limited expectations. Little did she know that her specialized knowledge would soon be tested in ways that had nothing to do with military punishment and everything to do with the dangerous realities that could emerge when least expected, even in the seemingly safe environment of a military kitchen. The second week of Elena's kitchen assignment brought an unexpected development that would begin to shift the dynamics within Fort Benning's mess hall. What started as routine food preparation tasks evolved into something more complex when Chef Rodriguez discovered that his newest kitchen worker possessed analytical skills that extended far beyond vegetable preparation. It began on a Tuesday morning when the industrial dishwashing system broke down during the peak breakfast service. The massive machine, responsible for cleaning thousands of plates, cups, and utensils daily, had been showing signs of mechanical stress for weeks. Now it sat silent and steaming, creating a bottleneck that threatened to disrupt meal service for the entire base. "Maintenance won't be here for at least 2 hours," announced Sergeant Williams, hanging up the phone with obvious frustration. "We're looking at hand-washing everything until they can get the parts." Chef Rodriguez surveyed the growing mountain of dirty dishes with the grim expression of someone calculating impossible logistics. Hand washing couldn't possibly keep pace with the volume they needed to process, which meant delays, complaints, and ultimately negative attention from base command that he couldn't afford. Elena had been observing the situation while continuing her assigned prep work, her mind automatically analyzing the problem with the same systematic approach she applied to explosive devices. Mechanical failures followed predictable patterns, and troubleshooting complex systems required the same methodical thinking whether dealing with kitchen equipment or bomb disposal. "Chef Rodriguez," she said, approaching his station with careful formality, "I might be able to help with the dishwasher." Marcus looked up from his inventory sheets with skepticism clearly written across his weathered features. "You know something about industrial kitchen equipment?" "I know about mechanical systems, hydraulics, and electrical troubleshooting. The principles are similar regardless of the application." The chef considered her offer for a moment. His options were limited, and waiting 2 hours for professional maintenance would create problems that could cascade throughout the day's operations. What harm could there be in letting her examine the machine? "All right, Vasquez, take a look, but don't make the situation worse." Elena approached the silent dishwashing system with the same careful attention she brought to unexploded ordnance. The machine was a complex assembly of pumps, heating elements, conveyor systems, and spray mechanisms that required precise coordination to function properly. She began by examining external indicators, listening for unusual sounds, and checking obvious connection points. "The water pressure gauge is reading abnormally low," she observed, running her hands along the supply lines with practiced efficiency. "And there's a vibration in the main pump housing that suggests bearing problems or debris obstruction." Her diagnostic approach impressed several kitchen staff who had gathered to watch. Most soldiers would have simply waited for professional repair technicians, but Elena moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to diagnosing complex mechanical problems under pressure. "Supply lines look clear externally," she continued, working her way systematically through the machine's components. "But I'm hearing irregular pump cycling that indicates either valve problems or internal blockage." Chef Rodriguez found himself watching with growing interest as Elena applied a troubleshooting methodology that reminded him of his own approach to complex cooking challenges. She worked methodically, testing each system component before moving to the next, building a comprehensive understanding of the machine's condition. "Here's the primary issue," Elena announced after 15 minutes of careful examination. She pointed to a section of the pump assembly where mineral deposits had accumulated around a critical valve mechanism. "Calcium buildup is preventing proper valve operation, which is reducing water pressure and causing the pump to work harder than designed." "Can you fix it?" asked Private Martinez, who had been assigned to begin the hand-washing process that everyone dreaded. Elena studied the affected components, calculating the tools and procedures needed to address the problem safely. "I can clear the blockage and restore normal operation, but I'll need some basic tools and about 30 minutes. Chef Rodriguez weighed his options quickly. Professional maintenance would take hours and cost significant money, while Elena's proposed solution could restore immediate functionality if she was correct about the diagnosis. "What do you need?" "Standard wrench set, pipe cleaning supplies, and a temporary bypass of the affected circuit while I work on the valve assembly." The next 30 minutes provided kitchen staff with an unexpected education in mechanical troubleshooting as Elena systematically disassembled, cleaned, and reassembled the problematic valve system. Her movements showed the same precision and confidence that characterized her EOD work, treating each component with careful respect while maintaining awareness of how individual parts contributed to overall system function. "Most people would have assumed the pump was failing," observed Sergeant Williams, watching Elena work with obvious admiration. "How did you know to check the valve assembly first?" Water pressure symptoms combined with pump vibration suggested flow restriction rather than mechanical failure, Elena explained while carefully cleaning mineral deposits from valve components. "In EOD work, we learn to differentiate between primary failures and secondary symptoms. The same diagnostic principles apply here." Her explanation revealed the analytical thinking that had made her successful in explosive ordnance disposal. The ability to see complex systems as interconnected components where problems in one area could create misleading symptoms elsewhere. Kitchen equipment, like bomb mechanisms, required understanding both individual parts and their relationships to overall function. As Elena reassembled the valve system and prepared to test her repairs, Chef Rodriguez found himself reconsidering his assumptions about the woman he had initially dismissed as punishment duty. Her approach to the dishwasher problem demonstrated expertise that extended far beyond military demolitions, suggesting a level of technical competence that could prove valuable in other situations. "The system should be operational now," Elena announced, stepping back from the repaired machine. "I'd recommend regular maintenance on the valve assemblies to prevent future mineral accumulation." Chef Rodriguez activated the dishwasher, which immediately resumed normal operation with none of the irregular sounds that had preceded its failure. Water pressure readings returned to normal ranges, and the machine began processing the accumulated dishes with smooth efficiency. "Outstanding work, Vasquez," he said, genuine appreciation replacing his earlier skepticism. "That saved us significant time and money." "Just applying standard troubleshooting methodology, sir." The successful repair created a subtle but noticeable shift in how kitchen staff viewed their newest member. Elena had demonstrated practical problem-solving skills that went beyond food preparation, establishing herself as someone who could contribute meaningfully to operational challenges that arose in the complex environment of military food service. Word of the dishwasher repair spread through the kitchen during lunch preparation, reaching the ears of other staff members who had been curious about the EOD specialist assigned to their facility. Stories began circulating about Elena's systematic approach to the mechanical problem, with details growing more impressive with each retelling. "I heard she diagnosed the problem in 5 minutes and fixed it without any manuals," Private Johnson told his friends during a break. "My cousin works EOD at Fort Campbell," added Corporal Davis, "says those specialists have to understand everything about how devices work before they can safely disarm them. It makes sense she'd be good with other mechanical stuff." The growing recognition of Elena's technical abilities created new dynamics within the kitchen environment. Soldiers who had initially viewed her as a temporary punishment assignment began seeking her input on various problems, from equipment adjustments to process improvements that could enhance operational efficiency. Chef Rodriguez, meanwhile, found himself observing Elena's work with increasing interest. Her attention to detail, systematic approach to problems, and ability to remain calm under pressure represented exactly the qualities he valued in his best staff members. The woman currently assigned to vegetable preparation possessed skills that could prove valuable in more demanding roles. "Vasquez," he called during the afternoon break, "come talk to me for a minute." Elena approached his office area with the formal bearing that characterized all her interactions with superior officers, though she had begun to notice that Chef Rodriguez treated his kitchen staff with more respect than many military commanders showed their subordinates. "You've been here 10 days now," he began, settling into his desk chair while indicating that she should sit across from him. "How are you finding the work?" "It's different from my usual assignments, sir, but I'm learning valuable skills about food service operations." Marcus studied her carefully, noting the diplomatic phrasing that avoided expressing any negative opinions about her current situation. "What's your background in mechanical systems? Before the Army, I mean." Elena considered how much personal information to share. Most of her colleagues knew basic facts about her military service, but few understood the path that had led her to EOD specialization. "I studied engineering at Arizona State before enlisting," she said carefully. "Mechanical and electrical systems have always made sense to me." "What made you choose military service over civilian engineering work?" The question touched on decisions Elena rarely discussed, involving family expectations, financial necessities, and personal desires for challenging work that civilian engineering positions hadn't seemed likely to provide. "I wanted to do something that mattered," she replied honestly. "Engineering is important, but military service offers opportunities to apply technical skills in situations where they could save lives." Chef Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. His own path to military food service had involved similar decisions about wanting work that served larger purposes than personal advancement or financial gain.
How much longer do you have on this kitchen assignment? 20 days, sir. And then back to EOD work? Elena's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. That depends on the outcome of my disciplinary review. Colonel Hartwell hasn't indicated whether I'll be returning to my previous duties. The uncertainty in her voice revealed concerns that extended beyond temporary kitchen assignment. Elena's career future remained unclear, dependent on decisions by superior officers who might not fully appreciate the complexity of the situation that had led to her reassignment. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? The official story is pretty vague. Elena weighed her response carefully. Chef Rodriguez had been fair and respectful in his treatment of her, but discussing details of her disciplinary situation required caution that could affect her long-term career prospects. I made a tactical decision during a training exercise that prioritized immediate safety over established protocol, she said finally. 2 soldiers were at risk, and waiting for backup could have resulted in casualties. You saved lives but got in trouble for not following orders? That's an accurate summary, sir. Chef Rodriguez shook his head with obvious frustration. He had encountered similar situations throughout his military career, where rigid adherence to procedure sometimes conflicted with practical problem-solving that addressed real-world challenges. Well, while you're here, I'd like to expand your responsibilities. You've shown aptitude for mechanical troubleshooting and food service operations. Interested in learning some advanced kitchen management tasks? The offer surprised Elena, who had expected to spend her remaining time on basic food preparation duties. Advanced responsibilities suggested that Chef Rodriguez viewed her as more than a temporary punishment assignment. I'd appreciate the learning opportunity, sir. Good. Starting tomorrow, you'll rotate through different stations to understand overall kitchen operations. Inventory management, meal planning, equipment maintenance, staff coordination. Consider it professional development. The expanded assignment represented significant improvement over vegetable preparation. But more importantly, it suggested that Chef Rodriguez recognized her potential contributions to kitchen operations. Elena felt genuine appreciation for his willingness to provide meaningful work rather than simply occupying her time with menial tasks. As she prepared to return to her current duties, Chef Rodriguez made one final observation that would prove more significant than either of them could anticipate. Vasquez, your background in handling dangerous situations, does that training ever cover emergency response procedures? Extensively, sir. EOD specialists receive comprehensive emergency response training, including medical first aid, hazardous materials handling, and crisis management protocols. Good to know. Never can tell when those skills might prove useful around here. Elena nodded and returned to her workstation, unaware that her emergency response training would soon be tested in ways that had nothing to do with explosive ordnance and everything to do with the unpredictable dangers that could emerge in even the most routine military environments. The afternoon passed quietly as Elena continued her food preparation duties with renewed focus, processing the unexpected conversation with Chef Rodriguez and considering how her expanded responsibilities might affect the remaining weeks of her assignment. For the first time since arriving at the kitchen, she felt that her specialized knowledge and training were being recognized rather than dismissed. The evening shift brought new challenges as dinner service required coordination between multiple kitchen stations operating under time pressure that reminded Elena of the structured urgency that characterized EOD operations. She found herself naturally gravitating toward organizational tasks that helped streamline workflow and prevent bottlenecks that could delay meal service. As the kitchen wound down from dinner service and began preparation for the following day's meals, Elena reflected on the unexpected developments that had characterized her second week of kitchen duty. What had begun as a punishment assignment was evolving into something more complex, providing opportunities to apply her problem-solving skills in new contexts while building relationships with colleagues who were beginning to appreciate her unique capabilities. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow would bring challenges that would test every aspect of her training in ways that would transform not just her kitchen assignment, but her entire future within the military structure that had seemed determined to limit her potential. The digital surveillance operation commenced at 1800 hours, with Rachel coordinating a multi-agency effort from Fort Brennan's Secure Operations Center. FBI cyber specialists had established monitoring points across Tennessee's telecommunications infrastructure, while NSA liaisons provided real-time intelligence on Garrett's digital activities. The complexity rivaled major counterterrorism operations. Special Agent Diana Foster from the FBI's Memphis field office joined the task force via encrypted video link. Foster's reputation for tracking sophisticated cybercriminals had earned her assignment to the most sensitive digital investigations, and her presence indicated how seriously federal authorities viewed the threat. Our technical teams have identified 17 different IP addresses associated with accounts Garrett established over the past 48 hours. He's using a rotating proxy network that spans 6 states, making real-time location tracking extremely difficult. Rachel studied the network topology Foster's team had mapped. Garrett's digital infrastructure resembled something a nation-state actor might deploy. Redundant communication channels, geographically distributed resources, and multiple layers of anonymization. The sophistication suggested months of preparation, not a spontaneous act of revenge. Sergeant First Class Carlos Rivera, Fort Brennan's communications security officer, raised a disturbing possibility. If he's targeting multiple installations simultaneously, he might be coordinating with external actors. Foreign intelligence services would pay handsomely for someone with his access and expertise.
The suggestion sent ripples of concern through the operations center. Espionage was a far more serious charge than unauthorized network access, carrying implications that extended well beyond Garrett's personal grievances. If foreign actors were involved, the compromise could affect national security at the highest levels. Rachel requested access to international telecommunications monitoring systems, a capability that required approval from military intelligence headquarters. While waiting for authorization, she focused on analyzing Garrett's operational patterns for exploitable weaknesses. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Specialist Lisa Chen, the youngest member of the cybersecurity team, noticed anomalous traffic patterns in the base's environmental control systems. Someone had accessed heating, ventilation, and air conditioning networks, infrastructure typically ignored during security assessments. Why would Garrett care about HVAC systems? Chen wondered aloud. Rachel immediately grasped the implications. Environmental controls were connected to the same network infrastructure as critical systems, but rarely monitored by cybersecurity teams. They represented a perfect backdoor for maintaining persistent access while avoiding detection. He's not just targeting classified data, Rachel realized. Garrett is positioning himself to physically compromise our facilities. HVAC systems control everything from server room temperatures to air filtration in chemical storage areas. The revelation transformed their understanding of Garrett's intentions. Physical sabotage combined with cyber attacks could cripple military operations far more effectively than data theft alone. If he could manipulate environmental systems during critical operations, the resulting chaos might provide cover for more devastating strikes. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes immediately ordered comprehensive security sweeps of all environmental control systems across Fort Brennan. The investigation uncovered evidence of unauthorized modifications to temperature sensors, air filtration controls, and emergency shutdown protocols. Garrett had been preparing multiple attack vectors simultaneously. Estimate time to completion if he continues current operations, Hayes demanded. Rodriguez consulted with the technical team before responding. Based on his preparation timeline, Garrett could execute a coordinated attack within the next 12 to 18 hours. He's established enough infrastructure to simultaneously target systems across multiple installations. The compressed timeline forced immediate tactical decisions. Military police units were dispatched to likely staging areas in Tennessee, while cyber warfare specialists prepared defensive measures for potential target installations. Rachel found herself at the center of a rapidly expanding operation that now involved hundreds of personnel. Special Agent Foster's team reported new developments from their surveillance operations.
Garrett made contact with someone in Eastern Europe approximately 3 hours ago using encrypted messaging applications. We couldn't intercept the content, but traffic analysis suggests coordination of timing and resources. The foreign connection confirmed everyone's worst fears. Garrett wasn't acting alone. He had established relationships with actors who possessed complementary capabilities and shared interests in compromising American military networks. The investigation had evolved from tracking a rogue soldier to preventing coordinated cyber warfare. Rachel proposed an aggressive counterstrike strategy. Instead of purely defensive measures, we could use Garrett's own infrastructure against him. If we can identify his command and control systems, we might be able to feed him false information or disrupt his communications. The proposal generated intense debate among the assembled leadership. Active cyber operations against targets within American territory raised complex legal questions, while operations against foreign actors required coordination with intelligence agencies. The bureaucratic complications threatened to paralyze their response. "Ma'am, we don't have time for extended policy discussions," Rachel argued. Garrett chose this timeline precisely because he knows military bureaucracy moves slowly. While we debate procedures, he's finalizing preparations for attacks that could compromise national security. Hayes weighed the risks against the potential consequences of inaction. "Approved for preparation only. You have authorization to develop offensive capabilities, but execution requires explicit approval from Pentagon leadership." Rachel immediately began crafting digital weapons designed to exploit vulnerabilities in Garrett's own network infrastructure. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was using the same techniques that had landed her in administrative exile, but now with official sanction and urgent necessity. The malware she developed targeted the specific proxy services and anonymous communication tools Garrett employed. Rather than destroying his infrastructure, her approach aimed to provide surveillance access and disrupt his operational timeline. If executed properly, Garrett would find his own tools working against him. As Rachel refined her cyber weapons, Specialist Chen made another crucial discovery. Environmental system logs revealed that Garrett had tested his access to Fort Brennan's infrastructure just 6 hours earlier. He had briefly activated emergency ventilation protocols in Building 47, the same administrative facility where Rachel had been exiled. "This is personal," she concluded. "Garrett isn't just targeting military networks randomly. He's specifically going after the command structure that relegated both of us to administrative duties." The realization provided insight into Garrett's psychological motivations and potential targets. If his primary grievance focused on career-destroying punishment for unauthorized cyber activities, he would likely target the specific officers responsible for those decisions. That narrowed the potential victim pool significantly. Rachel cross-referenced personnel involved in disciplinary actions against both herself and Garrett. The overlap was disturbing. Colonel Webb, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, and several other senior officers had participated in decisions affecting both cases. Garrett's target list probably mirrored her own chain of command. "We need immediate security details for all officers involved in our respective disciplinary proceedings," she recommended. If Garrett can manipulate environmental systems, he might attempt physical harm rather than just data compromise. Hayes coordinated protective measures while Rachel continued developing offensive cyber capabilities. The dual approach, defensive protection and offensive counterstrike, represented the military's evolving approach to cyber warfare. Traditional defensive measures alone were insufficient against sophisticated adversaries.
The Operations Center received an urgent intelligence update at 21:30 hours. NSA monitoring stations had detected increased activity on networks associated with known foreign intelligence services. Multiple nation-state actors were positioning themselves to exploit whatever chaos Garrett's operations might create. "This has escalated beyond a single rogue soldier," Foster observed grimly. "Foreign actors are treating this as an opportunity to gather intelligence on American military cybersecurity capabilities. Garrett may be providing them with a window into our defensive measures." The international implications transformed the mission's scope and urgency. What had begun as an internal security breach now threatened to expose military secrets to hostile foreign powers. The stakes extended far beyond Fort Brennan's local networks. Rachel finalized her offensive malware package and prepared deployment procedures. The weapons were designed to activate automatically when Garrett attempted his next major operation, providing real-time intelligence on his activities while disrupting his communications with foreign handlers. Deployment requires manual activation from this terminal, she briefed the command team. Once initiated, we'll have approximately 30 minutes of enhanced surveillance capability before Garrett's security measures adapt to our intrusion. The timing would be critical. Too early, and Garrett might detect the countermeasures and modify his plans. Too late, and his attack might succeed before they could gather actionable intelligence. Rachel would need to judge the optimal moment based on real-time assessment of his activities. As midnight approached, monitoring systems detected a surge in encrypted communications between Garrett's infrastructure and multiple foreign endpoints. Traffic analysis suggested coordination of final preparations for an imminent operation. The moment of truth was approaching. "All stations, this is command," Hayes announced over secure communications. "Prepare for immediate implementation of counterstrike protocols. Martinez, you have authorization to deploy offensive measures at your discretion." Rachel's finger hovered over the activation control as streams of data flowed across her monitors. Somewhere in Tennessee, Thomas Garrett was preparing to demonstrate just how vulnerable America's military networks really were. The question was whether her counterstrike would stop him or simply provide him with additional intelligence about military cybersecurity capabilities. The digital battlefield was about to claim its newest casualties, and Rachel Martinez found herself at the epicenter of a conflict that would determine the future of military cybersecurity. Her months of administrative exile had led to this moment, a chance to prevent catastrophic damage while proving that her unorthodox methods served legitimate purposes. The next few hours would either vindicate her approach or confirm her superior's worst fears about the dangers of giving technical specialists too much autonomy. In the world of cyber warfare, the line between heroism and treason often depended entirely on the outcome. Colonel Patricia Hayes led Elena through the maze of administrative buildings that comprised Fort Benning's command complex, her purposeful stride indicating the urgency that surrounded their unscheduled meeting. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the concrete pathways as they approached the secure conference facility where sensitive discussions took place away from routine base operations. Elena maintained respectful silence during their walk, though her mind raced with possibilities about what Colonel Hayes intended to discuss. The deputy director's presence at Fort Benning couldn't be coincidental, and her immediate response to the supply chain security breach suggested connections that extended far beyond routine inspection tours. The conference room they entered reflected the stark functionality that characterized military facilities. Gray walls, fluorescent lighting, and a rectangular table surrounded by chairs that had witnessed countless critical decisions throughout Fort Benning's operational history. Colonel Hayes gestured for Elena to sit across from her, creating formal distance that emphasized their difference in rank while allowing for direct communication. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Colonel Hayes began, opening a thick folder that contained documents Elena couldn't identify from her position. "Your discovery today represents the culmination of an investigation that has been ongoing for 6 months across multiple installations." Elena felt surprise register across her features before she could control her reaction. The bomb-making materials hadn't been an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger pattern that military intelligence had been tracking through sophisticated supply chain analysis. "Ma'am, we've been monitoring suspicious shipments at 7 different bases," Colonel Hayes continued, spreading photographs and documentation across the table surface. Each incident involved similar modus operandi: legitimate supply contractors, properly forged documentation, and precursor chemicals disguised as routine materials. The scope of the security breach impressed Elena with its sophistication and persistence. Someone had developed systematic methods for infiltrating military supply chains, requiring resources and intelligence that suggested organized threats rather than individual actors working independently. "Your identification of the suspicious indicators represents the first successful interdiction we've achieved."
Previous incidents were discovered only after materials had been distributed into general storage, making it impossible to trace their ultimate disposition. Elena studied the photographs spread before her, noting similarities in packaging techniques and documentation formatting that revealed consistent methodologies across multiple infiltration attempts. Her EOD training allowed her to recognize patterns that might escape personnel without specialized background in explosive materials and device construction. Has anyone determined the intended targets for these materials? That's classified information, Colonel Hayes replied, though her expression suggested that the answer involved threats of significant magnitude. What I can tell you is that your expertise prevented those materials from reaching their intended destination. The weight of potential consequences settled over Elena as she considered what might have happened if her routine inventory check hadn't revealed the suspicious shipment. Bomb-making materials in the wrong hands could produce devastating results, particularly within military installations where security measures assumed that internal threats had already been eliminated. Ma'am, if I may ask, how did my name come to your attention? My current assignment doesn't typically involve security investigations. Colonel Hayes smiled with what might have been amusement at Elena's careful diplomatic phrasing. Captain Torres forwarded her initial report about the security breach, including detailed analysis of how the suspicious materials were identified. Your systematic approach and technical expertise impressed our intelligence analysts.
Elena felt relief that her handling of the situation had created positive impressions rather than additional complications for her already uncertain career status. Professional recognition from EOD command levels could potentially offset the disciplinary issues that had led to her kitchen assignment. Additionally, Colonel Hayes continued, we conducted a comprehensive background review of your service record, including the circumstances that led to your current disciplinary status. Elena's pulse quickened as she realized that her previous insubordination was about to be evaluated by someone with authority to affect her military future. The disciplinary review that had been pending for weeks was apparently reaching its conclusion through channels she hadn't anticipated. The training exercise incident, Elena said carefully, acknowledging the elephant in the room while maintaining appropriate respect for superior officers. Colonel Hartwell's report describes your actions as willful disobedience of direct orders, Colonel Hayes said, consulting documents in her folder. Captain Morrison's report describes your actions as heroic intervention that saved 2 lives. Major Thompson's engineering analysis concludes that following standard protocol would have resulted in catastrophic explosive failure. The revelation that multiple officers had filed conflicting reports about her actions surprised Elena, who had assumed that Colonel Hartwell's negative assessment represented the official military position on her behavior during the training exercise. I wasn't aware that other officers had submitted reports about the incident, Elena admitted. Colonel Hartwell preferred to handle the situation through internal disciplinary channels, Colonel Hayes explained with obvious disapproval. Fortunately, EOD Command maintains oversight authority over all incidents involving explosive materials regardless of local command preferences. Elena began to understand that her case had attracted attention from military levels far above Fort Benning's local command structure. EOD operations involved specialized knowledge and procedures that required evaluation by qualified specialists rather than general military officers. Ma'am, what does this mean for my current status and future assignments? Colonel Hayes closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, studying Elena with the assessing gaze of someone making decisions that would affect careers and operational capabilities. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, the Army has invested considerable resources in your EOD training and development. Your 8-year service record demonstrates consistent excellence in challenging assignments, and your actions during both the training exercise and today's security incident reflect exactly the kind of analytical thinking and decisive action we value in EOD specialists. Elena felt cautious optimism building as Colonel Hayes' words suggested positive resolution to her disciplinary situation, though she remained aware that military decision-making often involved complexities that weren't immediately apparent. However, Colonel Hayes continued, your case also highlights systemic problems with how specialized personnel are managed within traditional command structures. Officers without EOD background sometimes struggle to understand the decision-making processes that guide explosive ordnance operations. The diplomatic criticism of Colonel Hartwell's handling of Elena's situation suggested that higher command levels had concluded that local disciplinary actions were inappropriate for the circumstances involved. What I'm prepared to offer you, Staff Sergeant Vasquez, is immediate transfer to a position that better utilizes your specialized training and demonstrated capabilities. Elena felt her heart rate increase as she processed the implications of Colonel Hayes' offer. Transfer could mean assignment to any EOD unit worldwide, representing either exciting opportunities or challenging deployments that would test her abilities in new environments. What kind of position, ma'am? The Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency has requested an EOD specialist with your particular combination of technical expertise and investigative instincts, Colonel Hayes explained. The supply chain security breaches we've been tracking require someone who can identify threats that traditional intelligence methods have missed. The offer represented career advancement that Elena had never imagined possible, particularly given her recent disciplinary problems. Assignment to Defense Intelligence Agency would provide opportunities to apply her EOD skills in contexts that extended far beyond routine explosive ordnance disposal. This would be intelligence work rather than traditional EOD operations. Hybrid assignment, Colonel clarified. Technical analysis of explosive threats combined with investigative support for complex security cases. Your background provides exactly the skill set they need for emerging threats that cross traditional operational boundaries. Elena considered the implications of such an assignment, recognizing both the professional opportunities it represented and the challenges that would come working in intelligence environments where EOD specialists rarely operated. Ma'am, I'm honored by the offer, but I want to ensure I understand the full scope of what's being proposed. Smart question, Colonel Hayes approved. The assignment would involve travel to various military installations to investigate suspicious activities, analyze potential explosive threats, and provide technical expertise for security investigations. Essentially, you'd be doing exactly what you did today, but on a national scale. The scope of responsibility impressed Elena with its potential impact on military security operations. Instead of waiting for threats to manifest at individual installations, she would be actively hunting for patterns that indicate developing dangers before they could cause harm. What about my current disciplinary status? Resolved, Colonel Hayes said firmly. EOD Command has concluded that your actions during the training exercise demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and expertise we expect from our specialists. Colonel Hartwell's disciplinary recommendations have been overruled. Elena felt profound relief wash over her as months of uncertainty about her military future finally reached positive resolution. The validation of her professional judgment meant more than career advancement, representing recognition that her specialized knowledge and training were valued rather than viewed as threats to traditional command authority.
There is one condition, Colonel Hayes added, her expression becoming more serious. This assignment requires security clearance upgrades that involve extensive background investigation and psychological evaluation. The process typically takes 3 months, during which you'd continue current duties. The mention of psychological evaluation created brief concern for Elena, though she recognized that intelligence assignments necessarily required more thorough screening than traditional military positions. What kind of psychological evaluation? Standard assessment for personnel assigned to sensitive intelligence positions, Colonel Hayes explained. Nothing invasive or punitive, just verification that you can handle the stress and responsibility that come with this level of security access. Elena nodded her understanding, recognizing that intelligence work involved pressures and responsibilities that required careful screening to ensure operational security and personnel reliability. Ma'am, I accept the assignment offer, pending completion of the security clearance process. Colonel Hayes smiled with obvious satisfaction at Elena's acceptance. Excellent. I'll initiate the transfer paperwork immediately. You should receive official notification within 72 hours.
As their meeting concluded and Elena prepared to return to her kitchen duties, Colonel Hayes made one final observation that would prove more significant than either of them could anticipate. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, one more thing. During your remaining time at kitchen duty, continue applying the same analytical attention you demonstrated today. The supply chain investigation isn't complete, and there may be additional threats that haven't been identified yet. Elena felt a chill of concern as she realized that her discovery of bomb-making materials might represent only a small portion of a larger security threat that continued to evolve within military supply systems. "Are you expecting additional suspicious shipments, ma'am?" "We're expecting anything," Colonel Hayes replied grimly. "The sophistication of what we've uncovered suggests planning and resources that indicate serious long-term threats to military installations nationwide." Elena nodded to the kitchen, with her mind processing the remarkable developments that had transformed her punishment duty into a launching pad for career advancement beyond anything she had previously imagined. But Colonel Hayes's warning about ongoing threats meant that her remaining time at Fort Benning might involve additional challenges that would test her abilities in ways she couldn't anticipate. Chef Rodriguez looked up from his evening prep work as Elena entered the kitchen, noting the thoughtful expression that suggested her meeting with Colonel Hayes had involved significant developments. "Everything all right, Vasquez? You look like someone who's received important news." Elena considered how much she could reveal about her conversation with the EOD Deputy Director while maintaining appropriate operational security about ongoing investigations. "Career developments that I wasn't expecting," she said carefully. "Looks like my kitchen assignment might be concluding sooner than originally planned." "Transfer back to EOD work?" "Something like that, sir. Still working out the details." Chef Rodriguez nodded with obvious satisfaction at the prospect of Elena returning to assignments that better utilized her specialized training, though he also felt genuine regret at losing someone who had contributed significantly to kitchen operations. "Well, you've certainly made an impression here. Your technical skills and work ethic represent exactly what we value in military personnel." Elena felt appreciation for Chef Rodriguez's recognition, particularly given his initial skepticism about her assignment to kitchen duties. His willingness to expand her responsibilities and provide meaningful work had made her punishment assignment tolerable rather than simply time-serving drudgery. As the evening shift began and dinner service commenced, Elena threw herself into kitchen duties with renewed energy generated by the positive resolution of her disciplinary situation and excitement about future assignment possibilities. But Colonel Hayes's warning about ongoing threats meant that her analytical attention remained focused on identifying anything unusual that might indicate continued security problems. The next few days would prove whether her discovery of bomb-making materials had ended the infiltration attempts or simply revealed the tip of an iceberg that threatened military installations throughout the country. Either way, Elena's future lay in hunting threats that traditional security methods had failed to detect, applying her EOD expertise in contexts that would challenge every aspect of her training and experience. 3 days after her meeting with Colonel Hayes, Elena's heightened awareness of security threats would prove prophetic in ways that no one could have anticipated. The morning began routinely enough, with breakfast service proceeding smoothly through the controlled chaos that characterized feeding thousands of soldiers on a tight schedule. But as Elena moved through her expanded duties, conducting inventory checks and monitoring kitchen operations, she noticed subtle changes in personnel behavior that triggered her analytical instincts. 2 civilian contractors had arrived the previous evening to perform scheduled maintenance on the industrial refrigeration systems. While their presence wasn't unusual, Elena observed details about their work patterns and equipment that didn't align with standard maintenance procedures. Her EOD training had taught her to recognize when supposedly routine activities concealed other purposes. The contractors, who identified themselves as Frank Miller and Tom Jackson from Southeastern Industrial Services, had spent most of their time in areas adjacent to the kitchen, rather than focusing on the refrigeration units that supposedly required attention. Elena had noticed them photographing facility layouts, measuring distances between key infrastructure points, and asking questions about base security procedures that seemed unrelated to refrigeration maintenance. Elena's concerns intensified when she discovered that their maintenance van contained equipment that extended far beyond what would be needed for routine refrigeration work. Through casual observation, she had identified cutting tools, electronic devices, and chemical containers that suggested capabilities for much more complex operations than simple equipment repair.
The situation demanded careful investigation without alerting the contractors to her suspicions. Elena began documenting their activities through discreet photography and systematic observation, building evidence that could support security intervention if her concerns proved justified. During the mid-morning break, Elena approached Chef Rodriguez with observations that required delicate handling to avoid creating panic while ensuring appropriate response to potential threats. "Chef, I have some concerns about the maintenance contractors working in our facility," she said quietly, drawing him away from other staff members who might overhear sensitive discussions. Rodriguez looked up from his meal planning documents with the expression of someone accustomed to handling routine operational problems. "What kind of concerns?" "Their work patterns and equipment don't match standard refrigeration maintenance procedures," Elena explained carefully. "I'm seeing indicators that suggest they might be conducting unauthorized activities." The chef's expression shifted from casual interest to serious attention as he processed Elena's warning. Her recent discovery of the bomb-making materials had established her credibility regarding security threats, making her observations worthy of immediate consideration. "What specific indicators are you seeing?" Elena outlined her observations about the contractor's photography of facility layouts, their questions about security procedures, and the presence of equipment that exceeded routine maintenance requirements. Her systematic presentation reflected the analytical approach that had made her successful in EOD operations. "Could be routine documentation for maintenance reports," Rodriguez suggested, though his tone indicated growing concern about the situation. "Possibly," Elena agreed, "but their behavior patterns suggest reconnaissance rather than repair work. They're spending more time gathering information about facility operations than actually working on refrigeration systems." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sergeant Williams, who had been monitoring the contractor's activities from his position at the prep stations near the refrigeration area. "Elena, you might want to see what those maintenance guys are doing now," he said quietly. "They're installing something inside the main cooling system that doesn't look like standard repair work." Elena felt her pulse quicken as she realized that her concerns about the contractors might be evolving into an active security threat. Installing unauthorized equipment in critical infrastructure could serve multiple purposes, none of them compatible with routine maintenance operations. "What kind of installation?" she asked. "Electronic devices attached to the cooling system controls," Williams replied. "They've been working on it for 20 minutes, but they told me it was just replacing temperature sensors." Elena's EOD training immediately identified multiple threat scenarios that could involve electronic devices attached to critical infrastructure. Remote control capabilities, monitoring equipment, or timing mechanisms could all be disguised as routine maintenance installations. "Chef, I think we need to contact base security immediately," Elena said, her voice carrying the urgency that characterized EOD operations when time-sensitive threats were developing. Rodriguez nodded grimly, recognizing that Elena's expertise in identifying dangerous situations needed to be taken seriously, regardless of how unlikely the threats might seem in routine kitchen operations. "Williams, keep an eye on those contractors without being obvious about it," he instructed. "Vasquez, come with me to make the security call." As they moved toward the office area where secure communications were possible, Elena's mind raced through potential scenarios and response options. If the contractors were conducting sabotage operations, their presence in the kitchen could threaten food safety, infrastructure security, or base operations through methods that traditional security measures might not anticipate. The call to base security initiated rapid response procedures that brought military police and security specialists to the kitchen within minutes. Elena found herself providing detailed briefings about her observations while trying to maintain operational security about ongoing supply chain investigations that might be connected to the current situation. Captain Sarah Bennett, the base security chief, arrived personally to coordinate the investigation.
At 31, she had earned recognition for her analytical approach to complex security challenges and her ability to manage crisis situations without creating unnecessary panic among base personnel. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Captain Bennett said, approaching Elena during a brief lull in the investigation activities, "I understand you're the one who identified suspicious contractor behavior." "Yes, ma'am. Observation patterns suggesting reconnaissance rather than maintenance, plus equipment that exceeds what would be needed for refrigeration repair." Captain Bennett studied Elena with interest, noting the systematic way she presented her observations and the confidence with which she discussed security threats. "Your background is EOD, correct?" 8 years active duty, ma'am. Currently assigned to kitchen duty pending transfer to Defense Intelligence Agency." "DI?" Captain Bennett's eyes rose in surprise. "That explains the analytical approach to identifying threats. What specific concerns do you have about these contractors?" Elena outlined her observations about the contractors' photography activities, their questions about security procedures, and the installation of unauthorized electronic equipment in critical infrastructure systems. Her presentation reflected the methodical thinking that had made her successful in explosive ordnance operations. "Based on your assessment, what's our priority concern?" "Unknown electronic devices attached to infrastructure," Elena replied without hesitation. "Could be monitoring equipment, remote control mechanisms, or timing devices for future sabotage operations." Captain Bennett nodded grimly, recognizing that infrastructure threats require immediate investigation regardless of how unlikely they might seem during routine operations. Electronic devices could serve multiple purposes, many of which pose serious risks to base security and personnel safety.
The investigation expanded rapidly as security specialists equipped with electronic detection equipment began systematic examination of areas where the contractors had been working. Elena remained available to provide additional observations while staying clear of operational activities that required specialized security training. Within an hour, the investigation revealed evidence that validated Elena's worst-case concerns. The electronic devices installed by the contractors included remote monitoring capabilities and explosive charges designed to destroy critical infrastructure on command. The sophistication of the devices suggested planning and resources that indicated serious threats to base operations. "This is a coordinated attack," Captain Bennett announced during the briefing that followed the discovery. "Someone provided these contractors with detailed intelligence about facility layouts, security procedures, and infrastructure vulnerabilities." Elena felt grim satisfaction that her suspicions had been correct, though the implications of coordinated infrastructure attacks created concerns that extended far beyond Fort Benning's immediate security. The bombing plot suggested planning and resources that could threaten military installations throughout the region. "Ma'am, have the contractors been apprehended?" Elena asked. "We're tracking their location now," Captain Bennett replied. "They left the facility 30 minutes ago, apparently confident that their devices wouldn't be discovered until after they had departed the area." The realization that saboteurs had been operating within the kitchen created unsettling awareness of how vulnerable military installations could be to threats that appeared routine until they were revealed through careful observation and analysis. Chef Rodriguez approached Elena as the immediate crisis response began winding down, and security personnel prepared to expand their investigation into the contractors' backgrounds and potential connections to larger threat networks. "Vasquez, once again, your expertise has prevented serious problems for this installation," he said with obvious respect. "How did you know to be suspicious of routine maintenance contractors?" "Behavior patterns that didn't match their stated mission," Elena replied. "EOD training teaches us to be alert for anything that seems inconsistent with normal operations, even when the inconsistencies are subtle." "Well, your attention to detail and willingness to speak up about concerns has probably saved lives today. Those explosive devices could have caused catastrophic damage if they had been activated." Elena appreciated the recognition, though she remained focused on the broader implications of what they had discovered.
The bombing plot suggested coordination and planning that could indicate additional threats at other installations, requiring comprehensive security review that extended far beyond Fort Benning. Chef, I'm concerned that this incident might be connected to the supply chain infiltration we discovered earlier this week. Someone is conducting systematic attacks on military infrastructure using multiple methods. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully, recognizing that the sophistication of both incidents suggested organized threats rather than isolated security breaches. As evening approached and the investigation continued with expanded federal involvement, Elena reflected on the remarkable week that had transformed her kitchen assignment from punishment duty into critical security operations. Her EOD expertise had proven valuable in contexts that extended far beyond explosive ordnance disposal, demonstrating how specialized training could provide insights that traditional security methods might miss. The events also validated her decision to investigate suspicious activities rather than ignoring potential threats out of concern for her already damaged career prospects. Military installations depend on personnel who were willing to speak up about security concerns, regardless of personal consequences that might result from false alarms. Captain Bennett approached Elena as she prepared to conclude her shift and return to temporary quarters. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, I'll be submitting detailed commendation about your role in discovering this sabotage plot. Your observations and analysis prevented what could have been a devastating attack on base infrastructure. Thank you, ma'am. Just applying EOD training to identify potential threats. Well, your training and instincts represent exactly what we need in security operations. I understand you're transferring to DIA soon. Pending completion of security clearance, ma'am. They're getting someone with exceptional analytical abilities and proven performance under pressure. Today's incident demonstrates exactly why EOD specialists are valuable for intelligence operations. Elena felt profound satisfaction that her specialized knowledge and training were being recognized and utilized appropriately, rather than being viewed as complications for traditional command structures. The week's events had demonstrated that her analytical skills and technical expertise could contribute meaningfully to military security in contexts that extended far beyond routine explosive ordnance disposal. As she left the kitchen facility and walked through the base toward her quarters, Elena considered the implications of her remaining time at Fort Benning. Colonel Hayes's warning about ongoing threats had proven accurate, and additional security challenges might emerge before her transfer to Defense Intelligence Agency was completed. The bombing plot also highlighted the sophistication of threats facing military installations nationwide. Her future assignment would involve hunting similar dangers at bases throughout the country, applying her EOD expertise to identify patterns and methods that traditional intelligence operations might overlook. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities as the investigation expanded and security protocols were enhanced to address vulnerabilities that the sabotage attempt had revealed. Elena's transition from kitchen duty to intelligence operations was accelerating in ways that none of them had anticipated, driven by threats that demanded immediate response rather than routine administrative processing. The week that had begun with routine punishment assignment was concluding with recognition that her specialized knowledge represented critical capabilities for addressing emerging security challenges. Her future lay in hunting threats that conventional methods had failed to detect, applying hard-won expertise in contexts that would test every aspect of her training and judgment.
The aftermath of the infrastructure bombing plot brought a level of scrutiny to Fort Benning that transformed routine operations into carefully coordinated security protocols. Federal investigators descended on the base with resources and expertise needed to unravel the full scope of what appeared to be a sophisticated, multi-pronged attack on military installations. Elena found herself at the center of briefings and debriefings that revealed connections between seemingly isolated incidents spanning multiple states. Federal investigator Marcus Thompson from the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Task Force arrived within hours of the device discovery, bringing with him case files that painted a disturbing picture of coordinated attacks on military infrastructure.
At 43, Agent Thompson had spent 15 years investigating threats to national security, but the current case represented levels of sophistication that challenged traditional investigative approaches. Staff Sergeant Vasquez, Agent Thompson, said during their initial interview, "Your identification of both the supply chain infiltration and the contractor sabotage represents breakthrough progress in an investigation that has been frustrating federal agencies for 8 months." Elena felt surprise register across her features as she processed the timeline that Agent Thompson had revealed. The threats she had identified weren't recent developments, but rather components of a long-term campaign that had been targeting military installations throughout the southeastern United States. 8 months, sir? We've been tracking suspicious incidents at 11 different bases, Agent Thompson explained, spreading photographs and documentation across the conference table. Each incident involved different methods but showed similar patterns of inside knowledge about military operations and security procedures. The scope of the coordinated attacks impressed Elena with their strategic thinking and operational complexity. Someone had developed systematic methods for penetrating military security using multiple approaches that avoided detection by traditional counterintelligence operations. "What kinds of incidents?" Elena asked, studying the photographs that showed evidence of sabotage attempts, supply chain infiltrations, and infrastructure attacks at installations throughout Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and South Carolina. "Everything from contaminated food supplies to disabled communication systems," Agent Thompson replied grimly. "Each attack was designed to degrade military readiness without creating obvious evidence of foreign intervention." Elena's EOD background allowed her to recognize the tactical sophistication in coordinating such diverse threats. The campaign represented planning and resources that suggested state-sponsored operations rather than domestic terrorism or individual actors working independently. "Any indication of who's coordinating these attacks?" "That's classified," Agent Thompson said carefully, "but I can tell you that your technical expertise has provided insights that traditional intelligence methods missed. The way you identified suspicious chemical signatures and unusual equipment configurations helped us understand methods we hadn't previously recognized." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Hayes, whose presence indicated that EOD Command maintained active involvement in the expanding investigation. Her expression suggested developments that would affect not just the current case, but Elena's future assignment prospects. "Agent Thompson, Staff Sergeant Vasquez," Colonel Hayes said, settling into her chair with documents that bore classification markings Elena couldn't identify from her position. "We need to discuss an accelerated timeline for several operations." Elena felt anticipation building as she realized that her transfer to Defense Intelligence Agency might be advancing more rapidly than the original 3-month security clearance processing schedule had indicated. "Ma'am, the sophistication of threats we're facing requires immediate deployment of specialists with your particular combination of technical knowledge and investigative instincts. DIA has requested emergency processing of your security clearance to enable immediate assignment to the task force investigating these coordinated attacks." The accelerated timeline represented both opportunity and challenge for Elena, who had expected additional months of routine kitchen duty while bureaucratic processes ran their course. Emergency security clearance processing involved intensive investigation and evaluation procedures that could be completed in weeks rather than months when national security priorities demanded rapid personnel deployment. "What would an immediate assignment involve?" Elena asked. Agent Thompson consulted his notes before responding. "Field investigation at the other installations that have experienced similar attacks. Your ability to identify technical indicators that traditional investigators miss could help us understand patterns and methods that we've been unable to piece together from individual incident reports." The prospect of applying her EOD expertise to complex security investigations across multiple states appealed to Elena's desire for challenging work that utilized her specialized training. Intelligence operations would provide opportunities to prevent threats rather than simply responding after attacks had already occurred. "There is one complication," Colonel Hayes added, her expression becoming more serious.
Intelligence indicates that our investigation activities may have been detected by whoever is coordinating these attacks. Enhanced security protocols are being implemented for all personnel involved in the task force. Elena felt concerned as she processed the implications of being targeted by sophisticated adversaries who had demonstrated capabilities for penetrating military security through multiple methods. Intelligence work involved risks that extended beyond routine military service, particularly when dealing with threats that have proven their willingness to attack American military installations. What kind of enhanced security protocols? Restricted movement, secure communications, protective details when necessary, Agent Thompson explained. Standard procedures for personnel working cases involving national security threats. The reality of intelligence work began to crystallize for Elena as she considered the personal and professional implications of accepting assignment to operations that could make her a target for hostile forces. Her EOD background had involved dangerous situations, but intelligence operations introduced different categories of risk that required careful consideration. "Ma'am, I understand the risks involved and accept the assignment," Elena said after a brief reflection. Her desire to contribute meaningfully to national security outweighed concerns about personal safety, particularly when her specialized knowledge could help prevent attacks on military personnel.
Colonel Hayes smiled with obvious satisfaction at Elena's acceptance. "Excellent. Agent Thompson will brief you on specific operational details and will begin emergency clearance processing immediately." As the briefing continued with classified information about the full scope of the threat investigation, Elena learned that her discovery of bomb-making materials and infrastructure sabotage represented only visible portions of a campaign that included cyber attacks, intelligence gathering, and systematic attempts to degrade military readiness through subtle but cumulative damage. "The psychological component concerns us most," Agent Thompson explained. "These attacks are designed to create uncertainty and paranoia within military communities, undermining confidence in security procedures and institutional protection." Elena recognized the strategic thinking behind psychological warfare operations that targeted morale and institutional trust rather than simply causing physical damage. Sophisticated adversaries understood that effective attacks on military organizations involved degrading human factors as much as destroying equipment or facilities. "How effective have these psychological operations been?" "More than we'd like to admit," Colonel Hayes said grimly. "Base commanders are questioning supply chain security, personnel are reporting increased anxiety about facility safety, and routine operations are being disrupted by enhanced security protocols that reduce efficiency." The conversation highlighted the multifaceted nature of modern threats that extended far beyond traditional military concerns about foreign invasion or conventional warfare. Contemporary security challenges required understanding of how subtle, persistent attacks could achieve strategic objectives through cumulative psychological and operational impacts. As the briefing concluded and Elena prepared to begin her transition from kitchen duty to intelligence operations, Chef Rodriguez appeared at the conference room door with expression that suggested both pride and regret about losing someone who had contributed significantly to kitchen operations. "Excuse the interruption," he said to the assembled officials, "but I wanted to speak with Staff Sergeant Vasquez before she transitions to her new assignment." Colonel Hayes nodded approvingly. "Of course, we're concluded here for now." Elena followed Chef Rodriguez into the hallway, curious about what he wanted to discuss privately before her departure from kitchen duties that had occupied the past 3 weeks of her military career. "Vasquez, I wanted to thank you personally for everything you've contributed during your time in my kitchen," he began. "Your technical expertise, work ethic, and leadership example have made lasting positive impacts on our entire operation." Elena felt genuine appreciation for the recognition, particularly given Chef Rodriguez's initial skepticism about her assignment to kitchen duties. His willingness to expand her responsibilities and provide meaningful work had made punishment assignment tolerable rather than simply time-serving drudgery. "Thank you, Chef. I've learned valuable lessons about operations management and teamwork that will serve me well in future assignments." "More than that," Rodriguez continued, "you've demonstrated how specialized knowledge and analytical thinking can contribute to any organization regardless of the specific technical requirements. Your approach to problem-solving and attention to detail represent exactly what we value in military personnel."
The conversation continued with discussion about Elena's impact on kitchen staff morale and operational efficiency, highlighting how her collaborative approach and willingness to share knowledge had influenced other soldiers to adopt similar attitudes toward their assignments. "I have something for you," Chef Rodriguez said, producing a small wooden plaque that bore the Fort Benning Mess Hall insignia along with an inscription that read, "Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, Outstanding Service and Dedication to Excellence." Elena accepted the plaque with genuine emotion, recognizing that it represented acknowledgement of her contributions to operations that had initially been intended as punishment rather than meaningful assignment. "Thank you, Chef. I've learned valuable lessons about operations management and teamwork that will serve me well in future assignments." "More than that," Rodriguez continued, "you've demonstrated how specialized knowledge and analytical thinking can contribute to any organization regardless of the specific technical requirements. Your approach to problem-solving and attention to detail represent exactly what we value in military personnel." The conversation continued with discussion about Elena's impact on kitchen staff morale and operational efficiency, highlighting how her collaborative approach and willingness to share knowledge had influenced other soldiers to adopt similar attitudes toward their assignments. "I have something for you," Chef Rodriguez said, producing a small wooden plaque that bore the Fort Benning Mess Hall insignia, along with an inscription that read, "Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez, Outstanding Service and Dedication to Excellence." Elena accepted the plaque with genuine emotion, recognizing that it represented acknowledgement of her contributions to operations that had initially been intended as punishment rather than meaningful assignment. "I'll treasure this reminder of my time here," she said honestly. "Your leadership and the relationships I've built with kitchen staff have made this assignment much more valuable than anyone expected." As evening approached and Elena prepared for her final night at Fort Benning before beginning intelligence training, she reflected on the remarkable transformation that had characterized her 3 weeks of kitchen duty. What had begun as humiliating punishment for insubordination had evolved into recognition of her specialized capabilities and career advancement beyond anything she had previously imagined. The week's events had also demonstrated how military service involved unpredictable challenges that required adaptability and willingness to apply specialized knowledge in unexpected contexts. Her EOD training had proven valuable for identifying threats that extended far beyond explosive ordnance disposal, providing insights that traditional security methods had missed. More importantly, the assignment had taught her about the value of maintaining professional excellence regardless of circumstances. Her decision to approach kitchen duties with the same analytical rigor she brought to EOD operations created opportunities that wouldn't have existed if she had simply served time without engagement or commitment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as she began intelligence operations that would take her to military installations throughout the region, hunting threats that had demonstrated sophisticated capabilities for avoiding detection by conventional security methods. Her future lay in applying hard-won expertise to protect military personnel and facilities from adversaries who understood how to exploit vulnerabilities that traditional defenses hadn't anticipated. The kitchen assignment was concluding, but the lessons about leadership, teamwork, and professional excellence would influence her approach to intelligence operations in ways that would prove crucial for the challenging investigations ahead. Elena's journey from punishment duty to national security operations represented a transformation that had been earned through competence, integrity, and unwavering commitment to military service despite institutional obstacles that had initially threatened to end her career. As she packed her belongings and prepared for departure, Elena carried with her the wooden plaque that represented acknowledgement of contributions that had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The recognition would serve as a reminder that excellence could emerge from any circumstances when approached with proper attitude and professional commitment to serving something larger than personal advancement or comfort.
6 months later, Special Agent Elena Vasquez stood before a joint session of military intelligence officials at the Pentagon, delivering her final briefing on Operation Silent Storm, the code name for the multi-state investigation that had dismantled one of the most sophisticated domestic terrorism networks in American history. The conference room buzzed with the quiet intensity of professionals who understood they were witnessing the conclusion of a case that had redefined military security protocols nationwide. The network's operational structure relied on exploiting assumptions about routine military activities, Elena explained, clicking through slides that detailed the investigative techniques which had ultimately exposed the conspiracy. Their success depended on security personnel dismissing subtle anomalies as normal variations in supply chain operations and contractor activities. Elena had spent the intervening months traveling between 17 military installations, applying her EOD analytical skills to identify patterns that traditional intelligence methods had missed. Her unique combination of explosive ordnance expertise and investigative training had proven instrumental in connecting seemingly isolated incidents into a comprehensive understanding of coordinated attacks. Agent Vasquez, interrupted General Patricia Morrison, the Pentagon's Deputy Director of Intelligence Operations. Your methodologies have resulted in fundamental changes to how we approach facility security. Can you summarize the key innovations that enabled success in this investigation? Elena consulted her notes before responding, though the techniques had become second nature through months of field application. Systematic integration of technical analysis with behavioral observation, ma'am. Instead of treating supply chain security and personnel monitoring as separate functions, we developed protocols that cross-reference chemical signatures, equipment configurations, and activity patterns to identify threats that individual assessment methods might miss. The approach had revolutionized security operations at installations throughout the southeastern United States, replacing compartmentalized inspection procedures with comprehensive analytical frameworks that recognized how sophisticated adversaries could exploit gaps between traditional security functions. The Fort Benning discoveries provided the breakthrough that enabled us to understand their operational methods, Elena continued. Once we recognized how they were using legitimate supply channels and contractor access to position assets for coordinated attacks, we could identify similar preparations at other installations. The investigation had ultimately revealed a network of 19 individuals working to degrade military readiness through subtle but cumulative sabotage operations. Their arrests had disrupted planning for attacks that could have caused significant casualties and operational damage across multiple states. After the briefing concluded and officials began discussing Elena's security innovations at military installations worldwide, Colonel Hayes approached with documents that would mark another significant transition in Elena's rapidly evolving career. Agent Vasquez, I have your new assignment orders, she said with obvious satisfaction. The Secretary of Defense has approved the establishment of a specialized EOD intelligence unit, and you've been selected as the founding team leader. Elena felt surprise and gratitude as she processed the implications of leading a unit that would institutionalize the investigative approaches she had developed during the past 6 months. Creating a permanent organization meant that her techniques would be taught to other specialists and applied systematically rather than depending on individual initiative. What would this unit's mission involve? Proactive threat identification at military installations nationwide, Colonel Hayes explained. Your team would conduct regular security assessments using the analytical methods that proved successful during Operation Silent Storm, hunting for threats before they can mature into active attacks. The opportunity represented career advancement beyond anything Elena had envisioned when she first reported for kitchen duty at Fort Benning. More importantly, it would enable her to protect military personnel and facilities by applying specialized knowledge to prevent attacks rather than simply responding after damage had occurred. As Elena prepared to leave the Pentagon and begin recruiting personnel for her new unit, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had transformed punishment assignment into recognition as a national security expert. The path from kitchen duties to intelligence operations had been unpredictable, but it had demonstrated how professional excellence and analytical thinking could create opportunities that transcended initial circumstances. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Chef Rodriguez. Saw the news coverage about your commendation ceremony. Proud to have worked with someone who never stopped applying her expertise regardless of the assignment. The kitchen crew sends congratulations and best wishes for continued success. Elena smiled as she read the message, remembering the relationships and lessons that had made her kitchen assignment meaningful rather than simply time-serving punishment.
The analytical skills and collaborative leadership she had developed during those 3 weeks continued to influence her approach to intelligence operations in ways that have proven crucial for successful investigations. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in her new office at the Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters, reviewing applications from EOD specialists interested in joining the threat assessment unit she was building. The candidates represented the best analytical minds in explosive ordnance operations, individuals whose technical expertise and investigative instincts could be developed into comprehensive security capabilities. "Agent Vasquez," came a voice from her doorway. Elena looked up to see Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, an EOD specialist from Fort Campbell, whose background included both explosive ordnance disposal and mechanical engineering. Elena gestured for him to sit across from her desk, noting the confident bearing and alert expression that characterized successful EOD specialists. His service record indicated 8 years of exemplary performance in challenging assignments, along with commendations for innovative problem-solving under pressure. "Sergeant Chen, what interests you about threat assessment operations?" "The opportunity to prevent attacks rather than just responding after they occur, ma'am. My EOD experience has shown me how sophisticated adversaries can exploit security gaps that traditional methods don't address." Elena nodded approvingly, recognizing the analytical thinking that had driven her own transition from routine EOD work to intelligence operations. The best candidates understood that preventing threats required different approaches than neutralizing explosives after they had been discovered.
What's your assessment of current security vulnerabilities at military installations? Chen considered his response carefully before answering. Over-reliance on compartmentalized inspection procedures that don't recognize how sophisticated threats can span multiple operational areas, ma'am. Adversaries who understand our security methods can position threats that individual inspection functions might classify as routine. His analysis reflected exactly the kind of systematic thinking that Elena valued in potential team members. Understanding how security vulnerabilities emerged from institutional assumptions represented the foundation for developing effective countermeasures. The interview continued with technical discussions about chemical analysis, behavioral observation, and investigative coordination that would characterize the unit's operational methods. Elena found herself impressed by Chen's grasp of complex security challenges and his enthusiasm for applying EOD expertise in new contexts. "Sergeant Chen, welcome to the team," Elena said as their conversation concluded. "You'll begin advanced training next month, followed by field deployment to installations where we're implementing enhanced security protocols." As evening approached and Elena prepared to conclude her first day in the new leadership role, she received a call from Agent Thompson, who had continued coordination between federal and military agencies investigating sophisticated threats to national security. "Agent Vasquez, congratulations on the new unit," he said. "I wanted to update you on some developments that might affect your operational planning." Elena felt familiar alertness as she recognized the tone that characterized discussions about emerging security threats. "What kind of developments?" "Intel indicates that other networks may be attempting to duplicate the methods we disrupted during Operation Silent Storm. Your unit's proactive assessment capabilities could prove crucial for identifying copycat operations before they mature into active threats." The possibility of additional sophisticated attacks highlighted the importance of the threat assessment unit Elena was building. Adversaries learned from successful operations, requiring security measures that could adapt to evolving methods and identify new variations on established techniques. "Any indication of specific targets or timelines?" "Nothing concrete, but pattern analysis suggests increased activity at installations in the Pacific Northwest and Southwest regions. Your team's deployment schedule might need to prioritize those areas." Elena made notes about potential priority assignments while considering how to structure training programs that would prepare her specialists for threats that might differ from those they had encountered during Operation Silent Storm. As the call concluded and Elena gathered her materials to leave the office, she reflected on how her professional identity had evolved from explosive ordnance specialist to intelligence analyst to unit leader responsible for protecting military installations nationwide.
Each transition had built upon previous experience while requiring new skills and perspectives that challenged her to grow beyond established expertise. The wooden plaque from Chef Rodriguez sat prominently on her desk, serving as a daily reminder that excellence could emerge from any circumstances when approached with proper attitude and commitment to serving larger purposes. The relationships and lessons from kitchen duty continued to influence her leadership approach in ways that enhanced both operational effectiveness and team morale. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Elena continued building the specialized unit that would institutionalize threat assessment methods she had developed through months of field investigation. Her future lay in training other specialists to recognize and prevent sophisticated attacks, applying hard-won knowledge to protect military personnel and facilities from adversaries who understand how to exploit institutional vulnerabilities. The journey from kitchen punishment to national security leadership had demonstrated that military service involved unpredictable opportunities for those who maintained professional excellence regardless of circumstances. Elena's specialized knowledge had found expression in contexts that exceeded her original expectations, proving that expertise combined with analytical thinking could create paths that transcended traditional career limitations. As she walked through Pentagon corridors toward the parking area, Elena carried with her the satisfaction of work that served purposes larger than personal advancement. Her EOD expertise had evolved into capabilities that protected military communities nationwide, fulfilling the desire for meaningful service that had originally motivated her enlistment years earlier. The kitchen assignment was now a treasured memory, but the lessons about leadership, collaboration, and professional excellence would continue influencing her approach to intelligence operations for years to come. Elena's story represented transformation earned through competence and integrity, demonstrating how military service could provide opportunities for those willing to apply specialized knowledge in service of national security, regardless of the obstacles or unexpected detours that characterized individual career paths. As she walked through Pentagon corridors toward the parking area, Elena carried with her the satisfaction of work that served purposes larger than personal advancement. Her EOD expertise had evolved into capabilities that protect military communities nationwide, fulfilling the desire for meaningful service that had originally motivated her enlistment years earlier. The kitchen assignment was now a treasured memory, but the lessons about leadership, collaboration, and professional excellence would continue influencing her approach to intelligence operations for years to come. Elena's story represented transformation earned through competence and integrity, demonstrating how military service could provide opportunities for those willing to apply specialized knowledge in service of national security, regardless of the obstacles or unexpected detours that characterized individual career paths. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.